The alley behind the 7th Street train station reeked of rot, and something worse. Mold clung to brick walls like a second skin, and empty cans littered the gutter where rain had washed away the last of last night's storm. Somewhere beyond the dumpsters, a woman lay motionless. She had no name on her, no ID, no phone, no shoes. Just a blood-stained hoodie stretched across her shivering body, pulled tight with trembling hands that barely had the strength to hold on. Beneath her, the concrete was streaked dark red. Mira had delivered the baby herself. Her back pressed to the cold bricks, her screams swallowed by the whir of a passing train. Her lips were cracked, her breath short, and the child against her chest was silent, then not. Then again. The infant was pale, too pale, still wrapped in the remains of Mira's shirt. The cord was still attached, tangled like a forgotten wire. Mira's eyes were glassy now, unblinking, her body too weak to move. The bleeding had slowed, only because her body had almost stopped trying. A man in a business suit walked by the alley entrance, glanced sideways, then hurried on. He did not stop. A woman pushing a stroller on the opposite sidewalk caught sight of Mira, stiffened, and pulled her toddler close. Someone took a photo from across the street and moved on. No one screamed. No one called for help. That part of the city had learned not to. It was safer to assume they were high or crazy or already dead. People did not interfere with ghosts. They looked and forgot. But across the intersection, behind tinted windows of a black electric SUV, a man had been watching for longer than a moment. Julian Kale sat behind the wheel, his fingers still resting on the start button. He had come here on impulse to check on a new outreach center being built a few blocks away. He was not supposed to be alone, not supposed to drive himself, and certainly not supposed to roll down his own window. But he did. The cry of the baby was faint, barely a whimper, but it cut through the thick city air like a wire pulled taut. Julian stepped out of the vehicle. He was 34 in a tailored coat that cost more than the rent of every apartment on the block. But he stepped forward without hesitation, his shoes finding purchase on oil-slick pavement. A splash of red caught his eye. She was barely breathing. He took off his coat, lowered himself beside her. She blinked at him, disoriented, blood smeared across her cheek. Her voice cracked like dried paper. "Please don't take him, please." Julian said nothing. He pulled off his scarf and pressed it beneath the baby, careful not to touch too much, careful not to hurt more. His voice was steady when he finally spoke. "We're going to a hospital. You're not alone anymore." Mira closed her eyes. She did not believe him, not yet, but she did not resist when he lifted her into his arms. From the shadows, a man filming on his phone muttered, "Freak," and walked off. Julian did not hear him, or if he did not care. He carried Mira and her child into the back of his SUV. No lights, no cameras, no entourage. Just one man, one bleeding girl, and a newborn who had not yet decided to live. And for the first time in a long time, something in that alley chose not to die. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and old worry. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as nurses moved with practiced urgency through double doors that swung open with a crash. Mira was rushed through on a stretcher, her arms still clutching the bundle of cloth where her baby lay pressed to her chest. Julian followed in silence, his coat stained and hands stiff with dried blood. No one questioned him. Money carried a kind of authority even in chaos. An intake nurse asked for information. he gave none. Only his name, Julian Kyle, and the words emergency, no insurance, and just help her. Then he stepped back and let the staff work. They separated mother and child. Mira flailed weakly when they took the baby, but sedation took hold before she could scream. Julian watched through the glass as a neonatal nurse cut the cord, cleaned the child, and checked vitals. For a moment, the room froze. The baby had not cried, not once. Julian's hands clenched at his sides. Then suddenly, a sharp, broken wail filled the air. High, thin, alive. Nurses sighed in unison. The baby was alive, fragile but breathing. Julian exhaled and left his name on both their charts. He did not go home. He sat in the hallway waiting, not knowing why. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, or maybe it was the way no one else had stopped. Hours passed. A doctor came, coat wrinkled and voice low. She'll make it. Severe blood loss, early stage infection, no prenatal care. But she's strong. That part stayed with him. She's strong. No one had called his mother that. They had called her a statistic, a junkie, a lost cause. Never strong. Julian stared at the ceiling tiles for a long time. When Mira woke up, it was still dark outside. She was alone in a private room, IV in her armskins scrubbed clean but raw. Her throat burned. Her body ached in places she had forgotten could hurt. Panic rose fast. Her baby. She pushed herself up too quickly and nearly collapsed. A quiet knock startled her. The door creaked open. Julian stepped in, holding a hospital bassinet with careful hands. The baby was swaddled now, pink-faced and sleeping. He placed it beside her bed without a word. Mira stared at him. Her voice was hoarse. "Why are you still here?" Julian pulled the single visitor chair closer but did not sit. "Because you are. And I didn't want you to wake up alone." Mira looked away. She did not thank him. Couldn't. Didn't know how. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Mira. Just Mira." He nodded. "That's enough." She blinked. "Who are you?" "Julian." He didn't add anything more. Not the last name, not the money, not the world that bowed when he walked in. Just Julian. Mira leaned back slowly, pulse. Her eyes on the child. "Is he okay?" "He is. He's a fighter, like his mom." Mira laughed once, sharp and bitter. She hadn't smiled in over a year. She hadn't planned on surviving the night. Julian sat finally, his hands resting on his knees. "I didn't bring you here to fix anything," he said quietly. "I just didn't want to be another person who walked past you." Mira did not speak, but her shoulders dropped just a little. Her fingers moved, brushing the baby's cheek. A nurse entered with the meds, paused when she saw Julian, then nodded silently and left them alone. When morning came, the city outside remained indifferent. But inside the room, something shifted. Mira had not yet cried, had not yet told him anything. But when he offered to find her clean clothes and a toothbrush, she did not say no. When he asked if she wanted to rest while he watched the baby, she closed her eyes. Not because she trusted him, but because she wanted to. That was the beginning. Not of healing, not of some magic fix, just of stillness, of the first breath in a long time that didn't taste like fear. Julian waited until she slept. Then he stepped out, phone in hand, calling someone from his foundation. Quiet voice, discreet arrangement. One of the safe apartments, unlisted, furnished, private. No cameras, no media, no noise, and a crib. When asked who it was for, Julian simply said, "Her name is Mira. That's all you need to know." The apartment overlooked nothing special, just an alley and a quiet back street where the garbage truck came twice a week. but it was clean. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen with a working stove, a crib tucked near the window with pale blue curtains. Julian opened the door with his own key, carrying a bag of folded clothes in one hand and a plastic-wrapped box of diapers in the other. Mira stepped in behind him slowly, baby pressed against her chest in a hospital-issued sling. Her eyes scanning every corner like she expected something to jump out. She said nothing. Julian did not speak either. He set the bag down near the couch and motioned toward the kitchen. There's food in the fridge. Nothing fancy, just real. Mira hovered by the door. Her hand clutched the strap of the sling like a lifeline. You live here. Julian shook his head. No, it's yours for as long as you need. Her voice cracked. Why? He paused. Because I've seen what happens when no one offers anything. And I don't want that to be your story. Mira did not answer. She walked the baby over to the crib but did not put him down. Instead, she stood by the window and stared out, her body half-turned like she might run at any moment. Julian left before she could ask him to. He did not say goodbye. He did not take her picture. He simply locked the door behind him and let silence fall. That night, Mira did not sleep. She paced the floor for hours, checked the locks twice, kept a knife under the pillow. The baby stirred often, needing warmth she barely knew how to give. At dawn, a knock sounded. She froze, then cracked the door an inch. Julian stood there holding a brown paper bag and a thermos. Coffee, he said, and bagels. I wasn't sure what you liked. Mira took them without a word. He left without stepping inside. The next morning, it happened again. This time the bag held oatmeal and bananas. She did not open the door but took the food. A rhythm began. He came every morning, left something small. Diapers, tea, a book with pressed flowers inside. Sometimes a single sentence written on a sticky note. You are not broken, just tired. She read that one 3 times. Mira still did not speak much, but she cleaned the apartment. She washed her hair. She started humming under her breath when rocking the baby. Once she looked through the peephole and saw Julian waiting with an extra set of keys and a quiet expression. He wasn't watching her, just waiting to see if she'd want them. She opened the door halfway. He handed the keys to her. No lecture, no questions, just said, they're yours now. Later that week, the baby cried for hours. Mira tried everything. Warm towel, milk, rocking. Nothing worked. She sat on the floor and whispered, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to do this. The knock came just before midnight. Julian's voice was soft. You okay? Mira didn't want to say yes, didn't want to lie, so she just opened the door. He stepped in, slow, cautious. His eyes found hers before they found the baby. May I? He asked. She hesitated, then handed the child to him with shaking arms. Julian cradled the infant like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mira watched the baby quiet almost instantly, his body relaxing into the safety of arms that knew gentleness. Julian hummed something old and low. Not a lullaby, just a rhythm. Mira sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. Her eyes burned. Her voice came out like gravel. I didn't want him to grow up like me. Julian didn't say anything, just kept holding the baby until his breaths evened out. Then he passed him back. Mira took him like glass. Thank you, she said. It was the first time she had said that to anyone in over 2 years. Julian nodded and stepped back toward the door. But before he left, he said, No one teaches us how to parent. We figure it out. Some of us learn late, but we learn. The next morning, Mira waited by the door. She opened it before he knocked. He looked surprised. She handed him back the thermos he had left the day before, washed and warm. He smiled then, small but real. Days passed like pages turning. Mira began to cook. Small things, rice, eggs, soup. She cleaned out a drawer for the baby's clothes. She folded diapers into neat stacks. She still didn't laugh, but she started talking, a little, about the night she ran, the shelter that turned her away, the man who called her a liability. Julian never interrupted. He never asked for more, just listened. Sometimes when the baby slept, they sat on opposite sides of the couch and drank tea in silence. Sometimes she asked questions. What's your favorite color? How do you take your coffee? Did you ever love anyone? Julian always answered gently. Blue, 2 sugars, yes, but it ended before I was ready. And you? Mira shook her head. I thought I did, but it was survival, not love. Julian looked at her for a long moment, then said, There's a difference. One night a storm hit. The power blinked out. Mira lit a candle and sat by the crib while the rain hammered the windows. Julian knocked anyway. He stood dripping in the hallway with a flashlight and a bag of soup. You didn't have to come, she said. I know. He handed her the bag and stepped back. You'll be okay. Mira watched him walk away through the candlelight, and something in her heart began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he would come back again. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle tick of the clock above the kitchen sink, and the soft inhale and exhale of the baby sleeping beside the crib. Mira stood barefoot on the tiled floor, arms crossed, her gaze on the closed window, though she saw nothing beyond it. The city was out there sprawling and indifferent, but in here everything felt smaller and quieter, and sometimes almost safe. Julian had not come that morning. For the first time in 2 weeks, the knock did not arrive. No coffee, no bagel, no note. Mira did not know why it made her chest feel tight. She told herself it was fine. He had a life, a job, a world that didn't include her. Still by noon she was pacing. By dusk she was checking her phone screen, even though she had no number to call. Then the knock came. It was slower this time, hesitant. She opened the door without a word. Julian looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes red like he had not slept. He held a manila envelope in one hand. Sorry I'm late, he said. I had to go somewhere. Mira stepped aside to let him in. He didn't sit, just handed her the envelope. She opened it slowly. Inside was a faded photograph. A woman, young, smiling, holding a boy about 3 years old. The woman looked tired, but her eyes were warm. That's my mother, Julian said. And that's me. Mira blinked. You look just like him now. He nodded. She died when I was 7, but not before they sold her to pay off something she never owed. Mira's fingers froze on the photo. Sold. She wasn't a slave, not in name. But someone signed a contract, a promise she couldn't read. She vanished after that. They said she ran. I know better. Mira set the photo on the table like it might break. Julian leaned against the counter. I built the first women's shelter when I was 25, because no one built one for her. I funded trauma centers, counseling clinics, safe houses, every place I wish she had. Mira looked at him, and for the first time she saw something cracked behind his calm. It wasn't just kindness, it was grief. It was guilt grown into purpose. She stepped forward slowly. You don't even know me. He met her eyes. I didn't know her either. Not all of her. I lost the chance. I'm not going to lose this one. Mira's throat tightened. She turned away before he could see the tears gathering. She wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater and tried to breathe. He watched her but didn't move, didn't come closer. Instead, he asked, "Do you have a last name?" She shook her head. "Not one I want to keep." "Then choose another," he said, "or make one. You deserve to be called something that doesn't hurt." Mira stared at the photo again. "I used to dream of changing everything about myself. My name, my face, even my blood." He spoke quietly. "You don't have to change to be new. You just have to be seen." For the first time in weeks, Mira stepped forward without fear. She placed her hand on the table near his, not touching, but close. "Thank you," she said. He smiled faintly. "Not for saving me, for not asking me to be grateful." He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "You don't owe me anything." Mira looked at the photo one more time. Then she said, "I think I'd like to call him Ezra, the baby." Julian smiled. "That's a good name. Strong, like his mother." Mira looked at him, eyes wet but steady. "You really believe that?" "I do." The room fell quiet again. But it wasn't the silence of strangers. It was the kind that lives between two people who have seen something unspoken in each other. That night, Julian stayed a little longer. He read Ezra a story while Mira cleaned up the dishes. He did not kiss her. He did not touch her. But when he left, he said, "I'll be here in the morning." Mira nodded, and this time she believed him. It started with a photograph. A grainy image snapped from across the street, uploaded by an anonymous account, and captioned with venom. "Billionaire Julian Kale seen entering rundown apartment complex with unidentified woman and infant." The image spread like oil on fire. Within hours, it was trending. Speculation flooded social media. Was she a mistress? Was the child his? Did the philanthropist have a secret family in the slums? Pundits on morning shows dissected the angle of the shot. Tabloids printed lies with glossy headlines. Julian ignored the calls at first. Then came the emails from board members. The foundation's name was being dragged through the mud. Donors were pulling out. His chief PR advisor used the word liability twice in the same sentence. Julian shut his laptop without replying. Meanwhile, in the apartment, Mira didn't know any of it. The baby was teething. Sleep was rare. She had finally managed to boil rice without burning it, and had smiled to herself in the quiet pride of small progress. The knock came earlier than usual. Julian's voice sounded strained. "We need to talk." She let him in. He looked tired in a way she hadn't seen before. Not just sleep-deprived, but hollowed out. He sat down and opened his phone, showed her the headline. Her face stared back at her from the screen, eyes blurry, and mouth slightly open. A freeze frame of survival, mistaken for scandal. Mira read it all, slowly, then again. Her hands began to shake. "I didn't mean for this," she whispered. "I know," Julian said. "It's not your fault." She stood up, paced, her breath caught. "They're saying horrible things. About you, about the baby." "I'll fix it," he said simply. Mira turned to him, eyes wide. "How you'll lose everything." He met her stare. "Then let me." She shook her head. "No. You worked for this. You built it. I won't be the reason it burns." "Mira." "No," she interrupted. "I lived in the shadows for years. I can disappear again. It's what I'm good at." Julian stood, walked toward her. "You don't have to run anymore." Her voice cracked. "But maybe you do. You're not the one they see when they look at that picture." "I am." The girl from nowhere with a baby and no name. You deserve better. He stepped closer. You are not a secret. You're a person. I won't let them turn you into shame. Mira's lips trembled. She looked at Ezra sleeping in the crib. His tiny chest rising and falling. His future was tied to hers. If she stayed, Julian would lose his name. If she left, she might lose herself. That night when Julian went to make a call, she packed a bag. Just diapers, formula, a worn hoodie, and the photo he had given her. She left a note on the counter. I don't want you to pay for saving me. I don't want Ezra to grow up hated for where he came from. Thank you for everything. I hope you keep building good things. I believe in you. I just can't be part of it. She kissed Ezra's forehead once. Whispered, I love you into his ear. Then she slipped out the door. The taxi driver asked no questions. She paid in crumpled bills, took a bus to the edge of the city, then another. She changed her name at the shelter intake, said she was just passing through. For 3 nights she didn't sleep. Her body remembered the alley, the bleeding, the weight of being alone. Ezra cried more, missed the warmth of the crib. Mira told herself it was for the best. On the 4th day she saw Julian on TV. Standing before a podium, the press swarming, a journalist asked if the rumors were true. Is the woman your mistress? Is the child yours? Julian looked directly into the camera. Her name is Mira. The child's name is Ezra. And no, they are not mine in the way you mean. But they are human beings. That's more than some of you are treating them as. Reporters shouted over each other, so come. He raised his voice. I picked her up off the street. Bleeding and alone. She didn't ask me for anything. I gave what I could. That shouldn't be a scandal. That should be a standard. I'd do it again tomorrow. Then he walked off. No apology, no PR spin, just truth. Mira watched from a diner booth. Her hand clenched the fork until her knuckles went white. Across the table, Ezra cooed softly. Mira closed her eyes. She didn't know if she had made the right choice, but in that moment, she knew he hadn't walked away. He had stayed, even when she didn't, even when it cost him. That was love, the kind no one taught, the kind she'd never been shown, until him. It took Julian 2 full days to find her. He canceled his meetings, shut down his calendar, ignored the board's warnings and the media's hunger. He didn't care. All he could see was the empty apartment, the crib without the baby, and the note she left that he had read so many times. The ink began to blur. The Foundation's tech team traced the taxi route, then security footage from a bus station 2 neighborhoods over. Finally, one of the shelter coordinators from his own outreach network called him back and said a woman matching Mira's description had come through but hadn't stayed. She left no forwarding name, but she had asked for diapers. Julian followed the trail like it was stitched into his veins. The map narrowed to a diner on the edge of a forgotten town off Route 40. Nothing special, just a booth by the window, a waitress who didn't ask questions, and a playpen in the corner for babies while mothers ate quietly. He found her there. Mira sat hunched over a mug of tea that had gone cold, her sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. Ezra was asleep in her lap, one fist curled near his cheek. She didn't see Julian at first, but the moment she looked up, her entire body froze. He stopped just inside the door. He didn't rush toward her, didn't speak, just met her eyes, waiting. Mira's mouth parted like she wanted to say something but couldn't. The waitress glanced between them. Mira shook her head slightly. The woman walked away. Julian took one step forward, then another. He stood in front of her, and the silence between them felt like a held breath. Mira finally whispered, "I didn't think you'd come." His voice was low. "I never stopped." She looked down at Ezra. "I didn't know what else to do. I thought disappearing was the least I could give you." Julian pulled out the chair across from her, but didn't sit. "You didn't need to give me anything. Not your silence. Not your absence." Mira's fingers tightened around the baby. "I ruined your name." He shook his head. "No, they tried to. You didn't ruin anything. I meant what I said. I'd do it again. Every day if I had to." Mira blinked rapidly. "I've never had anyone come back for me." He leaned forward. "I'm here now." She finally looked at him fully, the lines beneath her eyes deeper, her hair pulled back into a loose tie. She looked older, worn, but more real than ever. "You could have lost everything," she said. And he replied, "Then it would have been worth it." Mira's eyes filled. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. It was her bracelet, the one from the hospital. Her name scrawled in faded ink. "They found this on the floor. I kept it, just in case." He slid it across the table. She took it with shaking hands. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. Then she whispered, "I want to go home." Julian exhaled. He nodded once. "Let's go." The ride back was quiet. Ezra slept in the back seat. Mira stared out the window, but her hand rested between them, fingers brushing his. Not quite holding, not quite ready, but there. At the apartment, the lights were still warm, the crib untouched, the bottle warmer blinking softly. Mira stood in the doorway and looked around like she wasn't sure it was real. Julian didn't follow her in. "Not yet," he said. "I'll wait outside. If you want me to leave, I will." She turned slowly. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged. "Because you left for me. I'd do the same for you." Mira stepped forward, stopped a foot away. "You didn't come back because you wanted something, did you?" Julian shook his head. "I came back because I couldn't leave without knowing you were safe. That's it." Mira looked down, then up. "And what if I want more than safe now?" Julian's voice softened. "Then I stay, if you'll have me." She nodded, once, quiet but certain. He stepped inside, closed the door gently behind him, and for the first time in weeks, Mira let herself breathe all the way in. Safe wasn't enough anymore. She wanted something beyond it, something she hadn't dared name until now. The days that followed were not perfect. Healing never was. Some mornings Mira still woke with her heart pounding from dreams she couldn't remember. Some nights she still checked the locks twice before closing her eyes, but she no longer kept the knife under her pillow. The apartment felt different now, lived in. The curtains had been replaced with lighter ones that let more sun in. The fridge was always stocked. Ezra had a toy elephant that squeaked when squeezed, and a soft blanket with yellow stars stitched at the corners. Mira started cooking more, not because she had to, but because it made the space feel like hers. Julian didn't move in. He didn't even ask, but he came by every evening, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with stories, sometimes just to sit on the couch and drink tea with her in the quiet while Ezra slept. One afternoon, Mira stood barefoot in the kitchen floor on her hand's hair, pulled up messily, humming under her breath. Julian watched her from the doorway. Something in his eyes softening that hadn't softened in years. "You look happy," he said. She glanced over her shoulder. "I'm not sure if it's happiness, but I don't feel like I'm surviving anymore." He nodded. That's enough for now, she smiled. It was the kind that didn't fade quickly. Later that week, she asked him about the center he had been planning to open in the city. The one he had paused after the media storm. He shrugged. It's waiting. I didn't want to open it until I knew it would matter. Mira leaned against the table. What if we did it together? Julian raised an eyebrow. Mira nodded. I've been thinking about the other girls, the ones still out there, who are bleeding or scared or hiding in alleys the way I was. Julian's voice was quiet. What do you want to do? Mira took a deep breath. I want to open a space, just for them, not just beds, but dignity. A place to start over, with warm meals, childcare, classes, blankets that smell like lavender and not bleach. Julian smiled slowly. You've thought this through. She nodded again. I want to call it Second Light, because sometimes one chance isn't enough. He stepped forward. Then let's build it, together. It started small, just an old warehouse he already owned gutted and redesigned with soft colors and open windows. Mira helped choose every detail. The layout, the wall paint, the kitchen design. She picked the color of the cribs, the scent of the hand soap, the pillows. She insisted on real silverware and ceramic mugs instead of plastic. These girls need to feel human again, she said. Julian listened, always. He never overstepped, never took the credit. He just stood behind her, supported her, carried boxes, made coffee, picked up Ezra from the nursery when she got too busy. Word spread slowly, then quickly. Second Light became more than a shelter. It became a movement. One girl came with a black eye and a backpack full of broken promises. Another arrived with twin toddlers and a heart stitched together by instinct alone. They didn't ask questions. Mira didn't need their stories. She gave them rooms, names, jobs at the center if they wanted. And every night she sat in the common room with whoever couldn't sleep and just existed with them. She never claimed to be their savior. She never had to. One evening, Julian walked into the office to find Mira asleep on the couch. Ezra curled on her chest, papers spread around them. He stood there for a while, just watching. The woman he had found bleeding behind a dumpster was now the one carrying others forward. The next morning, Mira found a folder on her desk. Inside were legal documents, ownership papers, her name on them. Julian had transferred the property title to her. She stared at the page for a long time. When he walked in with coffee, she held it up. What is this? It's yours, he said. Always was. She walked over to him slowly. Why do you keep giving me things? Julian looked at her. Because no one ever gave them to you, and because when you hold them, you do something better with them than I ever could. Mira didn't cry. She smiled, soft, grateful, unshaken. That night she tucked Ezra into his crib, turned off the light, and sat with Julian on the porch of the center. The city moved around them, sirens in the distance, a train rattling 3 blocks over. But here it was still. He turned to her. You never told me your full name. Mira looked up at the stars. I didn't think it mattered. It does. She exhaled. Mira Sullivan. He repeated it slowly. It fits you. She chuckled. I made it up at the intake center. I just wanted something that sounded like someone who mattered. Julian leaned back in his chair. You do, with or without any name. She reached over, took his hand. I know, and that's the difference. It wasn't the apartment or the center or the press conference. It was this, that someone stayed, that someone saw her, not as broken, not as saved, just as human, whole, and worth staying for. On a late Sunday afternoon, nearly a year after the night, Julian found her in that booth on the edge of nowhere. Mira stood barefoot in the garden behind Second Light. Ezra toddled ahead of her, fists curled around a red rubber ball, giggling with every step. Around them, the building that had once been a silent warehouse now hummed with life. Children's laughter from the daycare, the smell of fresh bread from the shared kitchen, the low rhythm of someone playing guitar upstairs. Julian was fixing the railing on the front steps. Shirt sleeves rolled, forehead streaked with sweat and sawdust. Mira watched him for a moment, her heart slow and steady, no longer racing at every sound or movement. She had not just found safety, she had helped create it. That evening when the sun dipped low and cast a soft gold across the floorboards, Mira sat at her desk, writing. Not a journal this time, but a letter. Not to anyone specific, just to whoever might need it someday. Her pen moved slowly across the paper, the words quiet and careful but certain. She wrote, I was left bleeding, forgotten, barely more than a body, on the side of a street. No one stopped. No one asked my name. But then someone did, and he didn't offer rescue. He offered rest. He didn't ask me to be grateful. He gave me the space to remember who I was before the world stripped me bare. He let me be angry and scared and quiet, and I loved him for that long before I realized I could. She paused, looking at the photograph taped above her desk. Ezra in her lap, Julian beside them, both of them. Mid-laugh, the camera tilted just slightly by accident. The picture wasn't perfect, but it was real. She continued writing. Love doesn't always arrive loud. Sometimes it walks in, quietly sets down a warm meal, and sits beside you without asking questions. Sometimes it waits while you fall apart, and still stays. I used to think survival was enough. Now I know better. Safety is a start, but belonging is the miracle. The first time someone called me Mira, they said it gently, like it mattered. And suddenly it did. Outside, the chimes on the back porch stirred in the breeze. Ezra's laugh echoed faintly as he chased the ball across the grass. Julian's voice called gently after him. Mira signed the bottom of the page, then added one more line. You don't have to be saved. You just have to be seen. She folded the letter, placed it in a box labeled New Arrivals, and slipped it between a blanket and a bottle in the care kit. For the next woman who came through those doors with nothing but her name and the weight of being forgotten. As night settled across the city, the lights at Second Light glowed warm and steady, one window at a time. Inside there were no locks on the bedroom doors. No shame in starting over. Just a quiet promise in every hallway that here you were not a burden, not a story to hide, but a person. And if you needed to sleep for 3 days straight, or cry until your ribs ached, or laugh for the first time in months, you could, because this place had been built by someone who had once needed the same. In the nursery, Ezra slept with his arms splayed wide, like he owned the sky. In the kitchen, Julian placed a mug of tea beside the stove and turned off the light. In the hallway, Mira lingered, her fingers trailing the smooth wall she had once painted herself. She smiled. Not to anyone in particular, just to the air, to the quiet, to the moment. She whispered almost to herself. Some love stories do not start with kisses, they start with mercy. Then she stepped into the bedroom, lay down beside her son, and closed her eyes, not out of exhaustion, but peace. The kind you earn, the kind that's built, the kind that stays.